A single choice, one whispered from the heart, shattered the path that had been carefully carved for her. In a world where fortunes rise and fall with a signature, she dared to step away from wealth's cold embrace and walk toward a love that promised nothing but uncertainty. Yet destiny, ever watchful, does not ignore such courage. As pressure tightens, secrets gather like storm clouds, and a powerful rival prepares to strike. A breathtaking twist is set in motion, one that will test her resolve and awaken a passion she never expected. Before our tale unfolds, tell me, from where are you listening today, and what do you love most about historical romances? In the dim glow of gas lamps flickering against the velvet curtains of her family's crumbling New York mansion, Olivia Harrington stood before the grand mirror, her reflection a ghost of faded elegance. It was 1887, and the Gilded Age's glittering facade hid the rot beneath for families like hers. At 22, with chestnut curls pinned beneath a modest lace cap and a gown of worn silk that whispered of better days, she traced the lines of exhaustion on her face. Her father, once a railroad baron, had gambled away their fortune in a single reckless night at the Opera House. Now debts loomed like storm clouds over the Hudson, threatening to swallow them whole. "Olivia, my dear," her mother murmured from the doorway, her voice brittle as autumn leaves. Margaret Harrington clutched a letter, its wax seal broken, the paper trembling in her hands. "Mr. Alexander Thorne has arrived. He insists on speaking with you tonight." Olivia's heart clenched. Alexander Thorne, the ruthless steel magnate whose factories belched smoke over Pittsburgh, whose name evoked both envy and fear among the elite. At 40, he was a widower with a fortune vast enough to rebuild empires, and rumors swirled that he sought a young bride to secure his legacy. Her family had whispered of this match for months, a desperate alliance to save them from ruin, but Olivia knew the cost. Thorne's eyes, cold as forged iron, had lingered on her at last season's ball, appraising her not as a woman, but as an asset. She turned, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mother, I cannot, not him, not for money." Margaret's face crumpled, tears carving paths through her powder. "We have no choice, child. The bank calls tomorrow. Without Thorne's dowry, we'll lose everything. The house, your sister's future, our name." She stepped closer, pressing the letter into Olivia's palm. It was a proposal, formal and unyielding, promising security in exchange for her hand. "Think of us. Think of what love has brought us already. Nothing but heartache." Outside, the city pulsed with the era's fervor. Horse-drawn carriages clattering over cobblestones, newsboys hawking headlines of robber barons and labor strikes. Olivia had dreamed of more than this gilded cage. As a girl, she'd stolen moments in her father's library, devouring tales of adventure and passion, vowing to forge her own path. But reality was a cruel editor, slashing those dreams with red ink. Descending the staircase, her footsteps echoed in the empty hall, portraits of stern ancestors watching in silent judgment. Thorne waited in the parlor, his broad frame filling the armchair, a cigar smouldering between fingers heavy with gold rings. His suit, tailored in Savile Row wool, strained against his imposing build, and his mustache twitched with impatience. "Miss Harrington," he boomed, rising with the creak of polished boots. "Your beauty outshines the chandeliers. I've come to make my intentions clear." Olivia curtsied, her pulse racing like a locomotive off its rails. "Mr. Thorne, I appreciate your interest, but I must decline." His laugh rumbled, low and disbelieving. "Decline? My dear, this isn't a waltz you can refuse. Your family's debts are public knowledge. I offer salvation, a life of luxury, jewels, a place at my side in society's highest circles." He stepped nearer, his cologne sharp as machine oil. What more could a woman want? Freedom, she thought, a spark of joy untainted by transaction. But the words stuck in her throat as her mother's sob echoed from the hall. Thorne's gaze hardened, sensing her hesitation. "Refuse me, and watch your world crumble. Balls, gowns, security, all gone. You'll be just another fallen flower in this city of wolves." In that moment, as shadows danced from the hearth's dying fire, Olivia felt the weight of her choice crash down. Love or money? The question clawed at her soul, promising either heartbreak or chains. Yet deep within, a whisper stirred, a fateful encounter waiting just beyond the horizon, one that would rewrite her destiny. But for now, the parlour closed in, and Thorne's hand extended like a contract inked in blood. Imagine the chill of that decision, the air thick with unspoken threats. If this tale of passion and peril has you hooked, hit that subscribe button now and drop a comment below. From which city and country are you watching? Your stories fuel more like this. Let's journey through the Gilded Age together. The night deepened, and Olivia slipped away to the garden, the autumn wind carrying scents of coal smoke and fallen leaves. She clutched a locket from her grandmother, its silver warm against her skin, a relic of a love that defied convention. "What would you do?" she whispered to the stars, twinkling mockingly over Manhattan's spires. Unbeknownst to her, across the street, a figure watched from a shadowed carriage. Ethan Blackwood, the enigmatic shipping heir whose vessels conquered the Atlantic, had arrived in the city on business. At 28, with sharp features framed by dark waves and eyes like stormy seas, he was no stranger to society's games. Drawn by a mutual acquaintance's mention of the Harrington plight, he'd come to assess an investment. But seeing Olivia's silhouette against the lamplight, her posture defiant yet fragile, something shifted in him. A pull, inexplicable and urgent. He'd heard of Thorne's pursuit, the vulture circling the vulnerable. Ethan leaned back, drumming fingers on the leather seat. "Poor girl," he muttered to his driver. "Fate's a cruel mistress." Little did he know, their paths were about to collide, in ways that would shatter expectations and forge an unbreakable bond. As Olivia returned inside, the locket's clasp clicked shut, sealing her resolve. She would face Thorne's ultimatum at dawn, but in the quiet hours before, dreams visited her, of a man whose touch promised equality, not ownership, of a life where love triumphed over ledgers. The Gilded Age was no fairy tale, but for Olivia Harrington, the first page was turning, and the ink ran deep with possibility. And peril. The morning sun filtered through the lace curtains of the Harrington mansion, casting delicate patterns on the threadbare Persian rugs. Olivia awoke to the distant clamour of Fifth Avenue, carriages rumbling, vendors calling out their wares of fresh bread and newspapers thick with tales of booming industries and fallen fortunes. It was a new day in 1887, but for her family, the weight of yesterday's shadows lingered like the faint scent of last night's cigar smoke. She rose from her four-poster bed, the mattress sagging under years of use, and slipped into a simple morning dress of grey wool, its high collar buttoned to her throat. No frills for a household clinging to respectability. The fabric, once fine, now mended at the hems by her mother's careful hands. Downstairs, the kitchen bustled with the only remaining servant, old Mrs. Grady, her apron dusted with flour as she kneaded dough for the day's bread. "Miss Olivia," she greeted with a nod, eyes kind but weary. "Your ma's in the parlour, tallying the bills again." Olivia nodded, her chestnut curls still tousled from sleep. The Harringtons had once hosted lavish soirees, chandeliers blazing with beeswax candles, orchestras filling the air with waltzes. Now the house echoed with absence, servants dismissed, rooms shuttered to save on coal. Her father, Elias Harrington, had vanished into the haze of his regrets, spending days at his club nursing whiskies and avoiding the creditors' knocks. At 55, his once vigorous frame had withered, his sideburns streaked with grey, and his eyes hollow from nights lost to cards and illusions of recovery. In the parlour, Margaret Harrington sat at the mahogany desk, spectacles perched on her nose, quills scratching furiously across ledgers. At 48, she carried the poise of old money, her gown of navy bombazine modest yet impeccable, pearls at her throat a remnant of better times. But lines of worry etched her forehead, and her hands trembled slightly as she calculated. "Good morning, dear," she said without looking up. "The butcher's bill is due, and the coal man threatens to cut us off." Olivia poured tea from a silver pot, its spout dented but polished. "We'll manage, Mother, perhaps Father—" "Your father," Margaret interrupted softly, "is at the club again, chasing shadows." She set down the quill, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Thorne's proposal sits unanswered on my desk. He sent another note this morning, pressing for a reply. The man's persistent, like a steam engine on the tracks." Olivia's stomach twisted. Alexander Thorne. The name alone conjured images of his Pittsburgh mills, belching fire into the night sky, workers toiling like ants under his iron rule. Widowed 5 years with no heirs, he sought a bride from good stock to parade at galas and bear his legacy. Society whispered of his temper, his deals struck in smoke-filled rooms where fortunes rose and fell on a handshake. "I won't be bartered, Mother, not like livestock at auction." Margaret's eyes softened with a mix of pride and despair. "We're not barbarians, Olivia. It's alliance, not sale. Think of your sister, Clara. At 16, she's dreaming of debutante balls, but without means." Clara, with her bright laughter and golden ringlets, burst into the room then, twirling in a pinafore fresh from the seamstress, paid for on credit. "Olivia, Mrs. Grady says pancakes today. And did you hear? The Astors are hosting a ball next week. Can we go, please?" The innocence in Clara's plea pierced Olivia like a needle. Their family, once woven into the fabric of New York's elite, now frayed at the edges. Etiquette demanded poise. Ladies called in the afternoon, chaperoned by maids. Gentlemen tipped hats with calculated deference. Hierarchies ruled. Old families like the Harringsons clung to lineage, while new barons like Thorne bought their way in with vulgar displays of wealth. Olivia had navigated this world since girlhood, attending teas where gossip flowed like champagne, veiling barbs in silk-gloved hands. After breakfast, Olivia ventured to the drawing room where sunlight warmed the faded velvet settee. She picked up her embroidery hoop, a lady's duty, stitching samplers of virtue amid the era's rigid codes. But her needle faltered as footsteps approached the door. It was her father's valet, or what remained of one, a young nephew, Timothy, barely 18, his livery ill-fitting. "Miss," a caller, "Mr. Ethan Blackwood from the shipping lines, says it's business with your father, but insists on seeing the family." Olivia frowned. Blackwood. The name rang faint, like a rumour from the docks. Ethan Blackwood, heir to a fleet that dominated transatlantic trade, his vessels laden with silks from Europe and cotton from the south. At 28, he was said to be sharp as a clipper's prow, avoiding the scandals that plagued lesser men. Why here, in their diminished halls? She smoothed her skirts and entered the foyer. There he stood, tall and composed in a charcoal frock coat, his dark hair neatly combed, a gold watch chain glinting across his vest. His eyes, a deep blue-grey, met hers with quiet appraisal. Not the predatory gleam of Thorne, but something warmer, curious. "Miss Harrington," he said, bowing slightly, "I apologize for the intrusion. Your father's associate mentioned your family's situation. I've an opportunity in shipping investments that might interest you all." Margaret appeared, flustered but gracious. "Mr. Blackwood, do come in. Tea?" As they settled, conversation turned to markets, Tariffs on imports, the boom in rail lines snaking westward. Olivia listened, noting how Ethan's voice carried a steady rhythm, free of bluster. He glanced her way once, twice, as if gauging more than ledgers. Clara peeked from the stairs, whispering excitedly. But beneath the civility, tension simmered. As Ethan rose to leave, he pressed a card into Elias's absent hand, via Olivia. Should your father return, tell him Blackwood calls. Time is a tide. It waits for no one. The door clicked shut, and Margaret exhaled. A shipping magnate? Perhaps a better prospect than Thorne. Olivia pocketed the card, its edges crisp, yet as she did, a carriage rumbled to a stop outside. A messenger dismounted, bearing a sealed envelope addressed to her in bold script. She broke the wax, Thorne's crest. Inside, words stark and demanding. Miss Harrington, delay no longer. Meet me at the Waldorf tomorrow, or watch your name dragged through the society pages. Her hands shook, the garden's peace shattered, the first whisper of storm clouds gathered. What secrets did Blackwood hold, and how long before Thorne's shadow eclipsed them all? The Waldorf's opulent lobby hummed with the low murmur of New York's elite, crystal chandeliers casting a golden haze over marble floors, polished to a mirror shine. It was the afternoon of the following day, and Olivia Harrington stepped through the revolving doors with her heart pounding like a steam hammer in one of Thorne's factories. At 22, she had never set foot in such grandeur without her family's escort. Today she came alone, her grey wool dress a stark contrast to the silks and satins swirling around her. The air carried scents of fresh orchids and expensive perfume, masking the undercurrent of ambition that fueled this gilded world. She had agonized through the night, the letter's ultimatum burning in her mind. Refuse Thorne and the society pages, those vicious tongues of the press, would feast on the Harrington scandal, debts exposed, a family reduced to whispers and pity. Accept. And she chained herself to a man whose fortune reeked of exploitation. Margaret had urged caution, her voice a fragile thread. Go! Listen! For us! Elias remained absent, lost in his club's fog, while Clara's wide eyes pleaded silently at breakfast. Even old Mrs. Grady had pressed a sprig of lavender into Olivia's hand for luck, her gnarled fingers whispering prayers against misfortune. A doorman in crisp livery nodded her toward the tea-room, where afternoon rituals unfolded like a well-rehearsed play. Ladies in bustled gowns of emerald taffeta and ivory lace sipped Darjeeling from porcelain cups, their conversations a delicate dance of alliances and slights. Olivia spotted Alexander Thorne immediately, his bulk dominating a corner table, a copy of the Times folded beside his saucer. At 40, he exuded power, his broad shoulders straining the seams of a black broadcloth suit, a diamond stickpin winking at his throat like a predator's eye. His moustache, thick and waxed, curled with satisfaction as he rose to greet her. Miss Harrington, he said, his voice a gravelly baritone that cut through the chatter. He took her gloved hand, holding it a beat too long, his grip firm as forged steel. You honor me by coming. Sit. Tea. She lowered herself into the velvet chair, her skirts rustling softly. Mr. Thorne, your note left little choice, but I am here to speak plainly. He chuckled, signaling a waiter for an extra cup. Steam rose from the pot, curling like secrets in the air. Plainly, then. Your family's plight is no mystery. Elias Harrington's follies at the tables have left you teetering on the brink. I offer stability, a dowry to settle every debt, a townhouse on Fifth Avenue, jewels to rival the Vanderbilts. In return, your hand in marriage by spring. It's a fair bargain. Olivia's fingers tightened around her reticule, the lavender sprig inside a faint comfort. The tea-room's eyes darted their way, subtle glances from matrons, with fans fluttering like warning flags. Refusal here meant public humiliation. Whispers would spread by evening. branding her the ungrateful daughter who doomed her kin. And what of love, sir? Or respect? I am no ledger entry to be balanced. Thorne's eyes narrowed, the warmth in his tone evaporating like morning mist. Love is for poets and paupers. Respect? Earn it through loyalty. Society demands it. Marriages seal fortunes, not fancies. Refuse me, and the banks foreclose by week's end. Your mother peddles trinkets. Your sister toils as a governess. You'll haunt these halls as a curiosity, the fallen Harrington girl. The words landed like blows, each one chipping at her resolve. She thought of Clara's dreams, of the library where she'd hidden from reality. Pages filled with heroines who chose heart over hearth. But this was no novel. This was 1887, where women's paths narrowed to matrimony or marginalia. Hesitation cost her. A nearby table's laughter turned sharp, as if sensing vulnerability. I need time, she murmured, her voice barely above the clink of silverware. But Thorne leaned forward, his cologne overwhelming, a mix of tobacco and triumph. Time is the one luxury you lack. Sign this. He slid a parchment across the table, its edges gilded, words scripted by lawyers, a betrothal agreement binding her to him with clauses on heirs, estates, silence. By tonight, or I withdraw my protection. The world will know your desperation. Olivia's breath caught. The new world unfolded before her, rules etched in etiquette and escrow, chaperoned visits turning to supervised courtships, galas where she'd smile on Thorne's arm like a prized acquisition, every step watched by society's vigilant gaze. Obstacles loomed immediate and concrete. The scandal, if she bolted now, creditors at the door, her name tainted in the columns of the Herald. She rose abruptly, the chair scraping like a protest. I cannot sign blindly, Mr. Thorne. Not yet. His face darkened, moustache twitching. Then prepare for the fall, Miss Harrington. The vultures circle. Outside, the autumn sun dipped low, casting long shadows over Broadway's bustle. Olivia hurried to the curb, hailing a hansom cab with trembling hands. The driver, a weathered man with a pipe clenched in his teeth, tipped his hat. "Where to, miss?" "Home," she whispered, but as the horse clopped forward, a newsboy's cry pierced the air. "Extra! Harrington debts exposed! Scandal at the Waldorf!" Her blood ran cold. Thorne had moved swiftly, a leak to the press sealing her fate. The status quo shattered. No longer could they pretend at normalcy. Allies emerged in fragments, Margaret's frantic note waiting at home, perhaps Timothy's quiet loyalty. Antagonists solidified, Thorne, the unyielding force, and shadows of rivals like Blackwood, whose card still burned in her pocket. But the true rupture came that evening, as Elias finally returned, reeking of whiskey, collapsing into a chair with the evening edition clutched in his fist. "It's over," he slurred, eyes wild. "They know everything." Olivia knelt beside him, the family circle fracturing. She had to decide, yield to Thorne's alliance or risk it all on an unseen path. The locket at her throat warmed, a silent mentor urging defiance. Yet the cost clawed deeper. Isolation, disgrace, the loss of everything familiar. In the hush of the parlour, with gaslight flickering like uncertain hope, Olivia penned a reply to Thorne, acceptance, provisional and laced with dread. The ink dried, altering her world forever. A forced choice into betrothal's chains, pulling her toward an uncertain dawn where love's whisper might yet break free, or bind her eternally. The carriage wheels rattled over the uneven cobblestones of Madison Avenue, carrying Olivia toward the Vanderbilt residence for the weekly afternoon tea. It had been 3 days since her reluctant acceptance of Alexander Thorne's proposal, and the city seemed to hum with unspoken judgments. At 22, she felt the weight of her decision like a corset laced too tight. Her morning gown of soft lavender muslin, with its modest bustle and leg of mutton sleeves, offered no armor against the eyes that would appraise her. The provisional betrothal was no secret. Thorne had ensured that with a discreet word to the society editors, whispers already slithered through parlours, the Harrington girl, saved by the Steel King's purse. Margaret sat beside her, fanning herself with a lace handkerchief despite the crisp autumn chill seeping through the carriage windows. "Chin up, dear. The Vanderbilts are old allies. Smile, and they'll pave your way." At 48, her mother embodied faded gentility in a gown of deep plum serge, its high neckline adorned with a simple jet brooch, a token from Elias's better days. Clara, squeezed in the corner at 16, bounced with excitement, her pink cambric dress fluffed like a debutante's dream. "Will there be macarons? And dances after?" Olivia forced a nod, her gloved fingers twisting the silver locket at her throat. It had been her grandmother's, engraved with intertwined initials of a love match that defied family fortunes. Now, it felt like a talisman against the transaction she'd inked. The tea was a semi-public proving ground, ladies of means gathering in velvet-draped drawing rooms to dissect alliances over porcelain cups. Rejection here could doom her fragile status. Acceptance might forge a bridge to Thorne's world. The Vanderbilt mansion loomed, its brownstone facade a bastion of old money, gas lamps already lit against the fading light. A footman in maroon livery ushered them into the foyer, where the air bloomed with the scent of hothouse roses and fresh scones. The drawing room buzzed with a dozen women, their gowns a riot of brocades and ribbons, bustles swaying as they clustered around a grand piano, its ebony surface gleaming under crystal pendants. Mrs. Vanderbilt, a formidable widow of 50, with iron-grey hair piled high and a gown of burgundy velvet, greeted them with cool precision. "Miss Harrington," she said, her voice honeyed but eyes sharp as she took Olivia's hand. "And with news, I hear. Mr. Thorne, quite the catch. Fortune favours the bold, doesn't it?" The room's chatter dipped, heads turning like sunflowers to the light. Olivia curtsied, cheeks burning under the scrutiny. Subtle humiliation laced the air. A young miss in pale blue tulle tittered behind her fan, murmuring to her companion, "From debtors to diamonds, how expedient." They settled on horsehair settees, plates balanced on knees as maids poured steaming Assam from a silver service. Conversation flowed in eddies, gossip of the latest opera scandal, the Vanderbilt feud, but circled back to Olivia like hounds to a scent. "Tell us," pressed Mrs. Astor Light, a sharp-nosed matron in emerald silk, "is the wedding by Easter? Thorne's Mills must need an heir's touch of grace." Olivia sipped her tea, the liquid scalding her tongue. "It's early days, madam, but yes, we're exploring the arrangement." Laughter rippled, veiled as delight, but she caught the friction, her family's fall clashing against their rigid hierarchies. Old blood versus new bullion. Clara, wide-eyed, piped up innocently, "Mr. Thorne has the grandest house, like a castle." From the shadows near the piano, a new figure emerged. Ethan Blackwood, unannounced but invited through shipping ties to the Vanderbilts, stood tall in a dove-grey frock coat, its lapels sharp, a silk cravat knotted at his throat. At 28, his presence cut through the lace like a fresh breeze. Dark hair swept back, eyes scanning the room with quiet command. He'd come for business, no doubt, but his gaze settled on Olivia, lingering a fraction too long. No predatory gleam, just a flicker of something unguarded. Concern, curiosity. He approached with a bow, extending a hand to Margaret first. "Mrs. Harrington, a pleasure, and Miss Olivia. Fate smiles on reunions." His voice was low, steady, carrying the salt tang of ocean voyages. Olivia rose to greet him, her pulse quickening unexpectedly. "Mr. Blackwood, I didn't expect—" "Nor did I," he replied, his fingers brushing hers in the handshake, a micro-gesture, warm and brief, like sunlight piercing clouds. He released her hand slowly, their eyes meeting in a shared silence that spoke volumes amid the chatter. No words of pity, but a subtle defense. The seas teach one to navigate storms. Your family weathers well. The room noted it, whispers of Blackwood's interest, mingling with Thorne's shadow. As Ethan turned to converse with the host, Olivia caught him glancing back, a nod of quiet solidarity. It was the first small advance, a thread of connection in this web of scrutiny, but Thorne watched from afar. Unseen in the alcove, his messenger had reported the gathering. Now, he paced his office miles away, cigar smoke curling like vengeful spirits. "Keep eyes on her," he'd growled to his man. "No diversions." The tea wound down with a performance at the piano, a lively rendition of a Chopin nocturne, fingers dancing over ivory keys. Olivia watched, the music stirring a forgotten ache. As guests departed, Mrs. Vanderbilt pulled her aside, voice dropping. "Thorne's a force, child, but Blackwood, intriguing. Choose wisely, society's memory is long." Outside, in the carriage's dim interior, Olivia exhaled, the locket's weight a comfort. Ethan's card from days prior slipped from her reticule, a symbolic token, its embossed ships evoking freedom's horizon. She'd write to him tomorrow, perhaps, seeking counsel on investments. A tiny step toward agency. Yet as they rattled home, a newsboy's cry echoed, "Society notes! Harrington Thorne betrothal! Blackwood shadows the affair?" The paper, snatched by Margaret, bore a sly column. "Whispers at tea. Is Steele's prize already adrift?" The words stung, a visible consequence rippling outward. Thorne's hand, no doubt, stirring the pot. Olivia's integration teetered, acceptance laced with doubt, rejection's barbs sharpening. And in the gathering dusk, Ethan's glance replayed in her mind, a promise of more than ledgers. But at what cost, as shadows lengthened? Rain lashed the carriage windows like 1,000 accusing fingers, turning the road from New York to the Blackwood family estate in Connecticut into a quagmire of mud and regret. It had been a week since the tea at the Vanderbilts, and Olivia Harrington found herself trapped in this rolling confinement, her provisional betrothal to Alexander Thorne, a noose tightening with every jolt. Ethan Blackwood had extended the invitation through a formal note. Business with her father, he'd claimed, but Elias's absence forced her to stand in, chaperoned by Margaret, who dozed fitfully in the corner seat, her head lolling against the squabs. The storm had struck at dusk, swelling the Hudson's tributaries into raging torrents and stranding travellers from the afternoon train. Ethan rode inside now, his usual reserve cracked by necessity. The horse had thrown a shoe miles back, and his driver walked ahead with a lantern, cursing the deluge. At 28, Ethan cut a striking figure even in disarray. His wool overcoat damp and clinging, dark hair tousled from the wind, those blue-grey eyes shadowed by concern. Olivia sat opposite, her lavender travelling dress sodden at the hems, the silver locket at her throat, a cool anchor against the chaos. Lightning cracked the sky, illuminating his face in stark relief. He shifted, breaking the heavy silence. "This weather, it's as unforgiving as the seas I know, but it passes." His voice, low and measured, carried over the thunder's rumble, a lifeline in the gloom. She met his gaze, the carriage's sway forcing their knees to brush, a fleeting contact that sent warmth through the chill. "Some storms linger, Mr. Blackwood, like debts that follow no matter the horizon." The words escaped before she could cage them, raw from days of Thorne's insistent letters piling on the mantel like indictments. Ethan nodded slowly, his fingers drumming the armrest, scarred faintly from boyhood mishaps on the docks. He wasn't the polished air society painted. Beneath the cravat and vest lay a man shaped by loss. "My father built the fleet from nothing, a single schooner smuggling tea past blockades. He died when I was 15, lungs eaten by the damp holds. I took the wheel then, learned that fortune's a fickle current. Guilt. It pulls you under if you let it. Olivia's breath caught. The admission hung between them, intimate as a shared secret in this forced proximity. Margaret stirred, but slept on, her snores a soft counterpoint to the rain's drumbeat. Outside, wind howled through the bare oaks, bending branches like supplicants. Ethan reached into his coat, withdrawing a small leather-bound book. Its pages yellowed, spine cracked from years of handling. This was his, logs from the voyages, read it if you wish, stories of gales that tested men, not just ships. She took it, their fingers lingering, a gesture unspoken, charged with trust. The book's weight felt like permission to unburden. Flipping to a marked passage under the dim carriage lamp, she read aloud, her voice steadying. The sea demands truth. Hide your wounds, and they fester. She closed it, eyes lifting to his. What wound do you hide then? You watch me, as if you see more than ledgers. A pause stretched, thunder punctuating the quiet. Ethan's jaw tightened, the lines around his mouth deepening. Duty, Miss Harrington. After my wife, no, not wife betrothed, left me for a rival's gold 2 years past. She sought the thorn type, power over partnership. It hardened me. But seeing you at that tea, defying the whispers, you remind me that not all alliances are chains. His hand covered hers briefly, not in possession, but solidarity. A promise in the pressure, warm and resolute. You're stronger than this storm, stronger than him. Heat bloomed in her chest, thawing the fear that had iced her since the Waldorf. For the first time, Thorne's shadow receded, replaced by this man's quiet humanity. They spoke then, words weaving through the night. Her father's gambling fever, born of a partner's betrayal in the railroads. Ethan's solitary command of the Clippers, nights alone under stars that judged no one. Laughter slipped in, light as a stray sunbeam, a shared jest about society matrons' fans, wielded like battle standards. The air shifted, charged not with duty's weight, but possibility's spark. No kisses, no bold advances, just eyes locking in understanding, silences heavy with what might be. As the carriage crested a hill, the Blackwood estate emerged through the sheets of rain. A sprawling manor of fieldstone and gables, lanterns glowing like beacons. Servants rushed out with umbrellas, ushering them into the grand hall where a fire roared in a marble hearth. Margaret awoke, blinking at the warmth, while Ethan directed the staff with efficient grace. "You'll stay the night?" he said to Olivia, his tone brooking no argument. "The roads are impassable till dawn." In the drawing room later, after a simple supper of roast fowl and claret, Ethan played the pianoforte, an heirloom from his mother's side, its keys ivory smooth under his fingers. He chose a gentle melody, a folk tune from the coasts, notes rising like waves, cresting gently. Olivia sat nearby, the locket open in her palm, revealing a faded miniature of her grandparents, hands clasped in eternal defiance. "They eloped," she confessed as the music faded. "Against fortunes and fathers. Love was their compass." He turned, eyes soft in the firelight. "Then let it guide you still." His hand extended not to claim but to offer, a dance in place, their palms meeting, steps tentative amid the rugs. No words needed. The gesture sealed it, trust blooming like a rose in winter, but as midnight tolled from the mantel clock, a knock shattered the fragile peace. A sodden messenger, bearing Thorne's seal, thrust a letter into Ethan's butler's hands. "Urgent, for Miss Harrington!" She broke the wax, heart plummeting. Inside, stark script. "Word reaches me of your detour. Remember our agreement. Return by morn, or the bank sees your home. No diversions, Olivia, time's up." The warmth evaporated, replaced by dread's chill grip. Ethan's face hardened as he read over her shoulder, the intimacy fracturing like glass under pressure. The storm outside mirrored the one within. Hope dashed, Thorn's reach extending like an iron claw. What refuge now when even this brief haven turned to peril? The fire in the Blackwood drawing-room crackled defiantly against the storm's fury outside, but its warmth did little to thaw the ice settling in Olivia's veins. She clutched the letter, its paper crisp and damning, Thorn's bold script, a venomous serpent, coiled on the page. The words blurred before her eyes, threats of foreclosure, hints of scandals unearthed from her father's past, debts not just financial, but whispers of insider dealings in the railroads that could drag the Harrington name into court. No diversions, it ended, or lose all. Ethan stood rigid beside her, his face a mask of controlled rage, the piano's melody forgotten like a half-sung lullaby. At 28, he'd faced tempests on the high seas, but this, Thorn's claw reaching into his home, stirred a deeper fury. "He oversteps!" Ethan growled, snatching the missive to scan it anew. "This isn't courtship, it's conquest." Margaret, roused fully now by the intrusion, pressed a hand to her mouth, her plum gown rumpled from the journey. "Olivia, what have you done? That man, he'll ruin us before dawn." Her voice cracked, eyes darting to the rain-lashed windows, as if creditors lurked in the shadows beyond. Olivia rose, the locket swinging like a pendulum at her throat, its miniature portrait mocking her with tales of elopement long past. The intimacy of the carriage, the shared confessions under thunder's roar, they felt like a dream dissolving in the downpour. "I sought counsel, Mother. Nothing more." But doubt gnawed at her. Had she invited this? One glance from Ethan, one book passed hand to hand, and now the fragile bridge between them teetered. The butler hovered, lantern in hand, as the messenger slunk back into the night. Ethan paced the Persian rug, boots thudding softly, his cravat loosened in uncharacteristic disarray. "Stay here till morning. The roads will clear, and I'll send word to my solicitors." Thorn's bluffing, bluster from a man who buys loyalty but fears the truth. But Olivia shook her head, the provisional betrothal's chains pulling taut. Bluff or not, he's struck first, publicly. She unfolded a crumpled newspaper clipping slipped into the envelope, a society rag, fresh off the presses, headlined in smeared ink. "Harrington heiress strays. Betrothal tested by shipping scions, stormy welcome." Details spilled like spilled tea. Her unchaperoned arrival at Blackwood's estate, implied impropriety, ties to Elias's old gambling dens, twisted into accusations of fraud. Thorn's handiwork, no doubt, fed to the printers by spies who trailed the carriage. The attack landed frontal and fierce, sabotaging not just her reputation, but the family's last threads of dignity. Whispers would spread by breakfast. The desperate debutante, playing both steel and sails for advantage. Allies would scatter, Mrs. Vanderbilt's invitations revoked, old friends crossing streets to avoid the taint. Olivia's status plummeted, isolation wrapping around her like the sodden cloak she'd shed earlier. "I must go," she said, voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Back to the city, face him before he twists this further." Turning to Ethan, she searched his eyes, those stormy seas that had promised partnership. But now, a fracture showed. Trust breached by circumstance, his duty to his own name clashing with the pull toward hers. Ethan stopped pacing, grasping her arms gently, his touch a fleeting anchor. "Don't. This is his game. Separate us, make you doubt. I've resources. Let me fight this tide with you." His words hung heavy, laced with the guilt he'd confessed earlier, the fear of another loss to gold's allure. For a heartbeat, hope flickered, his fingers lingering, a silent vow amid the hearth's glow. Yet Margaret interjected, rising with frantic grace. "No, child. We return now. Thorn's ultimatum stands. Delay invites ruin." She glanced at Ethan, apology in her eyes. "Your kindness." But our world crumbles without his coin. The moment shattered. Olivia pulled away, the emotional rift widening like a chasm in the earth. Ethan's hand fell, his jaw clenching as resignation shadowed his features. No grand declarations, just the raw ache of separation. Literal, as the storm eased enough for the carriage to be readied, and emotional, as doubt seeded between them. Had she misread his warmth? Or was Thorne's sabotage proving the cost of defiance too steep? They departed at first light, the sky a bruised grey over Connecticut's rolling hills. Ethan watched from the portico, his silhouette stark against the manor, waving once as the wheels churned mud. Inside the carriage, silence reigned, broken only by Margaret's soft sobs. Olivia pressed the locket to her lips, its silver biting cold. The point of no return had come, her reply to Thorne, inked in haste back at the estate, committing to a formal engagement dinner that very evening. No turning back to the girl in the garden, dreaming of unwritten paths. By midday, New York's spires pierced the horizon, the Hudson a sullen mirror to her turmoil. The driver reined in before the Harrington mansion, its facade weary under the weight of impending siege. A crowd milled at the gate, reporters with notebooks, creditors with ledgers, neighbors peering from lace-veiled windows. Elias awaited in the parlor, face ashen, the morning papers strewn like battlefield casualties. It's everywhere, Olivia. Thorne's exposed the lot, my deals, the loans. They call for audits, whispers of jail for fraud. She entered the fray, the door slamming shut behind her like a vault-sealing fate. Isolation enveloped her, Clara hidden upstairs in tears, Margaret retreating to prayers, Elias crumbling under the assault. The alliance with Ethan, fractured, his card tucked away like a forbidden letter. Thorne's sabotage had broken the equilibrium, public wound festering into exile from grace. That evening, as gaslights bloomed along Fifth Avenue, a final ultimatum arrived, not by messenger, but etched in the society's unyielding code. Thorne's note, delivered by gloved hand. Dinner at Delmonico's. Come alone, or watch your father summoned to the bar of justice. No escape now. Olivia donned her finest gown, sapphire silk whispering of lost illusions, and stepped into the night. Behind her, the family home loomed, a tomb of what was. Ahead, Thorne's table waited, victory in his eyes. But in the carriage's sway, a tear traced her cheek. Ethan's parting glance haunted her, retreat or not. The heart he'd stirred refused to yield, yet how much further could she fall before love's whisper drowned in the din? The gas lamps of Delmonico's flickered like wary eyes as Olivia Harrington stepped through the heavy oak doors, the sapphire silk of her gown whispering against the marble threshold. The restaurant's grandeur enveloped her, crystal glasses chiming in toast, the air thick with the aroma of roasted pheasant and aged Bordeaux, laughter from the elite echoing off gilded walls. It was 1887's pinnacle of excess, where deals were sealed over oysters and fortunes toasted in crystal. But for Olivia, at 22, this dinner felt like a sentencing, Thorne's ultimatum a blade at her throat. He waited at a corner table, shrouded in shadows from the velvet banquettes, his broad frame dominating the space. Alexander Thorne rose with deliberate slowness, his black broadcloth suit impeccable, diamond cufflinks catching the light like accusations. At 40, his moustache curled in triumph, eyes gleaming with the satisfaction of a predator cornered its prey. "Miss Harrington," he rumbled, pulling out her chair with a flourish that masked possession. Punctual, wise. She sat, gloved hands folding in her lap, the silver locket hidden beneath her high collar, a secret talisman against his gaze. The waiter poured champagne, bubbles rising like trapped hopes. "Two alliances," Thorne said, lifting his glass. His voice carried over the din, drawing glances from nearby tables. Vanderbilts in the flesh, their whispers already weaving her tale into scandal's tapestry. Olivia sipped, the fizz sharp on her tongue. This isn't alliance, Mr. Thorne. It's coercion. The papers today, you're doing. He leaned back, chuckling low, the sound like grinding gears. Coercion. I protect what's mine, your father's debts. Let's say I ease their path. A nudge here, a loan there, and through proxies. Elias Harrington gambled on my rails once. He lost. Now you pay the stake. He signaled for the menu, but his eyes never left her, appraising, unyielding. Her pulse thundered. Manipulation, structural and deep. Thorne hadn't just found their ruin. He'd engineered it. Flashes came, Elias's late nights, frantic telegrams from Pittsburgh partners. You trapped us. She whispered, voice steady despite the storm inside. The locket burned against her skin, urging truth. Thorne shrugged, forking into his terrene. Business, my dear. The Gilded Age rewards the bold. Marry me and it all vanishes. Debts forgiven, your family restored. Refuse and the audits begin. Fraud charges for Elias. Your name muddied forever. Indignation surged, hot and righteous. But Olivia held it, mind racing. Across the room, a familiar figure entered. Ethan Blackwood, coat slung over his arm, dark hair windswept from the streets. He'd followed? No. Coincidence or fate's cruel jest? Their eyes met across the crowd, his widening in alarm. He approached a table near theirs, but his presence anchored her, a silent peak of hope amid the valley of Thorne's revelations. The meal dragged, courses of foie gras and venison blurring into Thorne's monologues, his mill's triumphs, visions of heirs in his image. But Olivia probed, voice calm as a diplomat's. Show me proof. If you've woven this web, let me see the threads. He paused, fork midway, then smirked. From his inner pocket, he withdrew a slim ledger, its leather embossed with his crest. Curious one. Very well. He slid it across, pages open to entries, loans to Harrington Associates, dated years back, signatures forged in desperation. Beside it, a diary excerpt, Elias's hand confessing reliance on Thorne's generous advances, blind to the hooks. And a portrait miniature, tucked in the back, a young Thorne with a woman, not his late wife, but Elias's old partner, her face twisted in betrayal. Your father crossed me once, Thorne murmured. This evens the score. The proofs hit like thunderclaps, each revelation building fury. Thorne, the architect of their fall, not fate, but calculated cruelty. Society's darling, exposed as a puppeteer, pulling strings on the vulnerable for sport. Olivia's hands trembled, but resolve hardened. This wasn't just personal. It tainted the era's underbelly, barons devouring the weak. She closed the ledger, meeting his gaze. You've shown your hand, sir, and it's fouled. Pushing back her chair, she rose, voice carrying just enough to turn heads. I break our betrothal here, publicly. No chains for a Harrington. Gasps rippled. Forks paused, eyes wide. Thorne's face purpled, mustache quivering. Foolish girl. You'll regret. But Ethan was there in strides, his hand at her elbow, steadying without claiming. Miss Harrington, he said, voice low for her alone. Brave. I've my own proofs, witnesses to his forgeries from the docks. His eyes, stormy yet warm, reframed him. Not distant duty, but guilt from past losses fueling his quiet fire. Trust bridged the chasm, a contained advance. His fingers brushing hers under the table's edge, promise over passion. Thorne lunged to his feet, voice booming. Security! This woman's slandering! Olivia turned to the room, agency igniting like a flare. Ladies, gentlemen, Mr. Thorne confesses his schemes. Ledgers prove it. My family won't bow to extortion. She withdrew a folded letter from her reticule, one she'd penned en route to the Times editor, detailing the sabotage. Handing it to a startled diner, a known journalist, she added, Publish this. Let truth light the shadows. Murmurs swelled to outrage. Indignation peaking against Thorne, the magnate unmasked as tyrant. Matrons clutched pearls. Gentlemen muttered of boycotts. Thorne sputtered, retreating as waiters intervened, his empire's facade cracking under the spotlight. Outside, in the cool night air, Ethan hailed a cab, his arm a shield around her shoulders. Reapproximation subtle, trust rebuilding. "You changed the tide," he murmured, helping her in. "But he's not done. Word's out, he summons a council tomorrow at the Opera House Assembly to counter-strike." Olivia nodded. Heart soaring, then dipping, hope's peak met by greater danger, Thorne's retaliation looming. The cab rattled into the night, the city alive with whispers of her stand. But as stars pierced the smog, she wondered, could truth topple a giant, or would it drag them all under? The Opera House's grand auditorium thrummed with anticipation, gas footlights casting a warm, deceptive glow over the sea of silk and satin. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls, their flames dancing to the murmur of New York's elite, gathered for the annual assembly, a glittering forum where fortunes aligned and reputations were forged or felled in a single area. It was the evening after Delmonico's upheaval, and word of Olivia Harrington's bold stand had spread like wildfire through the society pages. At 22, she entered on Ethan's arm, her gown of midnight blue velvet, hugging her frame with elegant simplicity, its modest train trailing like a shadow of resolve. The silver locket gleamed at her throat, a quiet emblem of the truths she'd claimed. Ethan, at 28, stood tall beside her in a tailored black evening coat, its silk lapels sharp, white tie knotted with unyielding poise. His hand rested lightly on hers, a tacit shield amid the stairs, some admiring, others laced with doubt. Whispers rippled, "The Harrington girl." And Blackwood. Thorne's furious. Margaret and Clara followed with Elias, the family reunited in fragile solidarity. Their attire, a mix of renewed finery borrowed from allies stirred by the scandal. The assembly convened in the velvet-draped hall adjoining the stage, a semicircle of gilded chairs filled with matrons in feathered headdresses, gentlemen with monocles glinting like weapons. Mrs. Astor presided at the center, her gown a cascade of ruby brocade, fans snapping like judgment. Alexander Thorne dominated the opposite end, his bulk squeezed into a chair, face flushed beneath his thick moustache. Flanked by lawyers in pinstripe suits and a cluster of sycophants, he clutched a leather dossier, eyes locking on Olivia with predatory heat. "Let the council begin," he boomed as the doors sealed, trapping the air thick with perfume and tension. "Slander demands reckoning." Olivia's pulse raced, but she held Ethan's gaze, a brief, steadying glance that spoke of shared nights in storm-tossed carriages. The forum's rules were ironclad, testimonies aired, alliances tested, under the elite's watchful code. Thorne rose first, voice thundering like his factory hammers. "This woman," he jabbed a finger at Olivia, "accuses me falsely. Her family's debts, self-inflicted folly. My aid, generous overtures twisted into lies." He flung open the dossier, pages fluttering like dark wings. Inside, a forged letter in Elias's mimicry, confessing fabricated frauds, affidavits from bought witnesses, dockside thugs claiming Blackwood's ships smuggled illicit goods, tainting Ethan's fleet, a damning caricature sketch circulated earlier that day, depicting Olivia as a scheming siren, luring magnates to ruin. Gasps echoed. Mrs. Vanderbilt leaned forward, brow furrowed. "Proof, Mr. Thorne? Or theatre?" But the sabotage landed hard. Murmurs turned accusatory, eyes sliding to Olivia with fresh suspicion. A witness, a weaselly man in a threadbare coat, shuffled forward. I seen Blackwood's crews unload contraband. And the girl. She peddled secrets for coin." Laughter barked from Thorne's corner, his triumph swelling like smoke from his mills. The community teetered, old hierarchies clashing. Would they side with the established baron or the defiant upstarts? Olivia's hands clenched, indignation boiling into resolve. This was the moral crux: yield to his web, preserving a hollow peace, or expose the rot. Risking total exile, she stepped forward, voice clear and unyielding, cutting through the din. "Theatre indeed, Mr. Thorne, but the curtain falls on you." Ethan nodded subtly, slipping a sealed packet from his coat, prepared in the frantic hours since Delmonico's, gathered from loyal captains and Elias's redeemed ledgers. With Mrs. Astor's nod, Olivia presented the counterstrike. "First, the letter. Examine the ink, fresh, not aged like father's hand, and the seal, stolen from our mantle as my maid attests. A servant girl, trembling but true, corroborated from the wings, her words slicing Thorne's forgery bare. Next, the affidavits. Ethan called his key witness, a grizzled harbour master, summoned by telegraph relay, his uniform crisp. Lies, all. Blackwood's ships run clean. These men are Thorne's hirelings, paid in steel scrip. Receipts tumbled out, inked tallies of bribes traced to Thorne's Pittsburgh accounts. The tide shifted. Murmurs swelled to outrage as the caricature's artist confessed under pressure, a society illustrator coerced by threats to his commissions. Olivia drove the final nail, unveiling Thorne's own ledger from Delmonico's, cross-referenced with bank drafts proving he'd funneled the Harrington debts through shell companies, engineering their fall for this very leverage. "Not aid," she declared, voice ringing, "extortion. He preys on the vulnerable to hoard power, twisting our Gilded Age into a cage for the weak." The hall erupted. Mrs. Astor rose, fan stilled, her verdict thundering. "Mr. Thorne, your schemes disgrace us all. Boycott his ventures. Let the markets judge." Cheers rose, matrons turning backs on him, gentlemen muttering of stock dumps. Thorne staggered, face ashen, dossier scattering like defeated confetti. His sycophant slunk away, the weasel witness fleeing into the shadows. Public humiliation crashed over him, whispers of investigations, exiles to lesser circles, his empire's foundations quaking. Euphoria surged through Olivia, cathartic and electric, the weight of chains lifting as the community reframed her. No longer the desperate debtor, but the heroine who'd illuminated truth. Applause thundered, hands clapping her shoulders, invitations murmured anew. Ethan pulled her close in the crush, his arm a circle of quiet victory. "You did it," he whispered, breath warm against her ear. "We did." The assembly dissolved into a whirlwind of toasts and retreats, the opera's overture swelling as guests filed toward seats. Thorne vanished into the night, a broken silhouette against the footlights. In an alcove off the foyer, away from the throng, Olivia and Ethan paused, the din fading to a hush. Gaslight softened his features, her hand finding his in the dimness, a tacit commitment, fingers intertwining without words, hearts aligning in the post-tempest calm. No grand vows yet, just the promise of partnership, born of trials shared. But as they stepped toward the auditorium, a footman approached, envelope in hand. "For Miss Harrington, from Thorne's man. He flees to Europe, but vows return." The storm's silence held, fragile. What final threads remained to tie before dawn broke on their hard-won peace? The morning after the Opera House assembly dawned crisp and golden over New York, the Hudson River sparkling like a promise fulfilled under a cloudless sky. Olivia Harrington stood at the window of the Harrington mansion, now bustling with renewed life, servants rehired, rooms aired out, the air free of the stale weight of despair. At 22, she felt transformed, her posture straight in a simple day dress of pale green chalice, its soft folds a far cry from the armor of sapphire silk from the night before. The silver locket rested open on her dressing table, its miniature portrait catching the light, a relic no longer burdened by chains. Downstairs, the parlor hummed with activity. Elias Harrington, at 55, sat at the mahogany desk he'd once abandoned, quill in hand, reviewing ledgers with a clarity born of redemption. The audits Thorne had threatened never materialized. Instead, the elite's boycott had rippled through Wall Street like a tidal wave. Thorne's steel mills faced strikes from emboldened workers, his loans called in by former allies turning coats. Whispers from transatlantic cables confirmed it. He'd fled to Europe on the first steamer, his Pittsburgh empire fracturing under investigations into forgeries and bribes. No jail for him. Not yet. But exile loomed, a prestige stripped bare, his name synonymous with ruin rather than riches. "He pays now," Elias muttered to Margaret, who nodded. Her navy bombazine gown crisp as she poured coffee. At 48 she moved with quiet authority, the worry lines around her eyes softening for the first time in years. Clara burst in at 16, golden ringlets bouncing, a new ribbon in her hair, a gift from Mrs. Vanderbilt, whose invitation to the next debutante ball arrived that morning. "Olivia, the papers call you a heroine." And Ethan's ships. They're the talk of the docks. The family had mended. Elias's gambling fever, broken by public shame, turned to purpose. He'd pledged half his remaining railroad shares to a workers' fund, a gesture echoing Olivia's stand. Margaret's hands, once trembling over bills, now directed the household with grace reclaimed. Even old Mrs. Grady beamed from the kitchen, her pancakes stacked high in celebration, but the true resolution wove through the streets to Ethan's shipping offices on the East River, where Olivia arrived by carriage mid-afternoon. The wharves teemed with longshoremen loading crates of silk and spices onto clippers bound for Liverpool, the salt air sharp with possibility. Ethan Blackwood waited at the door, 28 and steady as his vessels, his frock coat unbuttoned, sleeves rolled to reveal forearms tanned from inspections at sea. No longer the reserved air shadowed by past guilt, he greeted her with open arms. Not possessive, but equal. "The council's verdict holds," he said, leading her to his private study overlooking the water. "Thorne's assets freeze tomorrow. No return without facing the Baron's wrath." Inside, maps unrolled across a oak table, charts of trade routes marked with fresh ink, expansions funded not by desperation, but alliance. Olivia traced a line westward, her finger lingering. "And us? No more shadows." He turned her gently, eyes meeting hers in the slanted sunlight. "Free choice, Olivia. From the first glance in your garden, I saw a partner, not a prize. Marry me, not for ledgers, but for the horizon we build together." No ring from dusty attics or tainted vaults. Instead, he presented a simple gold band, forged fresh from his ship's manifest gold, unadorned, eternal. She slipped it on, the metal warm as his palm enclosing hers. Their lips met then, soft and sure, a kiss born of love's quiet triumph, sealing vows whispered against the river's rush. No grand spectacle, just two souls aligned, the Gilded Age's glare yielding to their light. Word spread swiftly. The society's matrons, once whispering barbs, now toasted the match at afternoon calls, Mrs. Astor sending orchids with the note, "Truth elevates." Allies reaped rewards. The Vanderbilt secured Blackwood shipping contracts, their loyalty affirmed. Timothy, the young valet, rose to estate manager under Ethan's wing, his ill-fitting livery traded for a proper suit. Neutrals repositioned, former Thorne sycophants offering olive branches, seeking favor in the shifting tides. Elias found purpose in reform circles, advocating fair rail dealings. Clara bloomed toward her debut, dreams intact. By evening, they walked the mansion's garden, now cleared of autumn's decay, lanterns strung like stars. Olivia's hand in Ethan's, they envisioned legacy, a foundation for fallen families, funded by joint ventures, a school for daughters of laborers, libraries stocked with tales of defiance. No toxic past lingered. The Harrington home renovated, its library expanded as a beacon. Ethan spoke of voyages they'd share, not as passenger and captain, but equals charting courses. As dusk fell, a soft knock came. A letter from Europe, Thorne's hand trembling on the page. You've won the field, but battles end. Beware the long game. A gentle hook dismissed with a shared laugh. Olivia leaned into Ethan, the city lights twinkling beyond. Their transformation shone, her voice bold in counsel, his guilt shed for compassion, leadership forged in fire. The kiss deepened under the emerging moon, a horizon of future unfolding, love's reward, enduring as the rivers flow. In this new equilibrium, fate had rewritten their stars, bright and unyielding. 10 years had woven their gentle threads through the tapestry of time, transforming the raw edges of 1887 into a legacy etched in quiet triumphs. It was 1897 now, and the Harrington mansion on Fifth Avenue stood revitalized, its brownstone facade gleaming under fresh coats of paint, gas lamps replaced by the soft glow of electric fixtures that Ethan had insisted upon, though sparingly, honoring the era's cautious embrace of innovation. Ivy climbed the trellises, a verdant reminder of endurance, and the garden bloomed with roses that Olivia tended herself, their petals a far cry from the withered leaves of that fateful autumn night. Olivia Blackwood, at 32, moved through the sunlit drawing room with the grace of a woman who had claimed her world. Her chestnut curls, once pinned in modest restraint, now fell in loose waves beneath a simple afternoon hat of straw and silk ribbons. The gown she wore, a high-necked affair of pale blue linen, its skirt falling straight without the era's exaggerated bustles, whispered of comfort over convention. Motherhood had softened her features, adding a luminous warmth to her eyes, those same eyes that had once stared down a magnate's threats. Beside her, Ethan, 38 and broader in the shoulders, from years commanding both boardrooms and brigs, lifted their son, little Elias, named for the grandfather who had found redemption. At 5, the boy clutched a wooden model ship, its sails fashioned from Ethan's own designs, giggling as his father swung him high. "Careful. Love," Olivia said, her voice rich with laughter, reaching to steady them. "He'll command the fleet before he walks the deck." Ethan set the child down, his hand lingering on her waist, a touch as familiar and fervent as their first shared silence in the storm-tossed carriage. Their marriage, sealed in a modest ceremony at the Vanderbilt Chapel 2 springs after the Opera House victory, had blossomed into something unbreakable. No grand society wedding, just vows exchanged under blooming dogwoods, with Margaret dabbing tears into her lace handkerchief, and Clara, now 26 and wed to a kind scholar, beaming as maid of honor. 2 more children followed, a daughter, Grace, 3 years old with her mother's curls, and a spirit that already questioned the world's rigid rules, and a babe in the nursery, Noah, mere months old, whose cries occasionally pierced the afternoon calm. Their love had not merely endured, it had deepened, rooted in the soil of trials shared. Evenings found them on the veranda overlooking the Hudson, Ethan's arm around her as they watched clippers glide toward the horizon, vessels now bearing the Blackwood Harrington crest, a merged emblem of sails and rails. "You chose heart over ledgers," he'd murmur sometimes, echoing her garden whisper from a decade past. "And fate rewarded us both." No shadows of doubt lingered. The provisional betrothal to Thorne was a faded scar, discussed only in quiet jests about the steel-hearted suitor who had unwittingly forged their path. The family had transformed. Elias Harrington, at 65, resided in a cozy wing of the estate, his once hollow eyes bright with purpose. The gambling fever broken, he'd channeled his railroad knowledge into advocacy, founding a society for fair labor practices that echoed Olivia's stand. No more whiskies at the club. Instead, he doted on his grandchildren, recounting sanitized tales of the Gilded Age's wilder days. Margaret, 58 and elegant in her silver-streaked hair, oversaw the household with a benevolent hand. Her jet brooch, traded for a locket matching Olivia's, filled now with miniatures of the little ones. Clara's marriage had brought stability, her home nearby filled with books and laughter, a bridge between old gentility and new freedoms. Society had shifted too, ripples from that opera house night expanding like waves from a stone cast true. The elite, once a fortress of hierarchies, now whispered of the Blackwood reforms, shipping lines that paid fair wages, drawing workers from Thorne's beleaguered mills. Mrs. Astor had passed her scepter to younger guardians, but her final soirees had toasted Olivia as a pioneer, her name synonymous with courage. The foundation they established, a school for daughters of immigrants and laborers, tucked in Brooklyn's growing wards, thrived, its library stocked with volumes Olivia curated, tales of women who bent the world to their will, yet not all paid lightly. Alexander Thorne's price had been steep, a cautionary shadow over the decade. Exile in Europe soured into obscurity. His mills crumbled under boycotts and strikes, assets seized in a flurry of lawsuits that dragged through courts from Pittsburgh to London. At 50, he returned briefly in 1892, gaunt and broken, seeking mercy from old rivals. None came. Whispers told of a lonely death in a Swiss villa 3 years prior, fortune dissipated on futile appeals, legacy reduced to a footnote in society rags. The magnate felled by a woman's truth, his sycophants scattered, some reformed under Ethan's employ, others vanished into lesser trades, paying for blind loyalty with obscurity. Old Mrs. Grady, faithful to the end, had passed peacefully at 80, her grave marked by a rosebush from the garden. Timothy, risen to steward of the Blackwood estates, married a seamstress from the school and raised a family that bridged docks and drawing rooms. As the sun dipped low, casting amber across the room, Olivia gathered the children for a story hour by the hearth. Ethan joined them, settling Grace on his knee, Noah cradled in her arms. The silver locket passed to Grace one day, clicked open to reveal not just portraits, but a pressed petal from their wedding dogwoods, nostalgia wrapped in future promise. Once upon a time, Olivia began, her voice weaving the tale they all knew by heart. A girl in a crumbling mansion chose love over chains. Laughter mingled with the crackle of the fire, the family circle complete. 10 years on, the Gilded Age's glare had mellowed into a golden haze, their triumphs a beacon for those still navigating its storms. Fate, indeed, had rewarded her, and in Ethan's steady gaze, Olivia saw eternity reflected, hearts entwined, legacies blooming eternal. As the final notes of Olivia's story faded into the evening hush of the Blackwood drawing room, the children nestled closer, their eyes wide with the wonder only a well-told tale can ignite. Little Elias clutched his model ship tighter, Grace yawned against her mother's shoulder, and baby Noah stirred in peaceful slumber. Ethan squeezed Olivia's hand, his thumb tracing a gentle circle on her skin, a silent affirmation that their own adventure had woven into something timeless. Outside, the Hudson whispered secrets to the night, a river that had borne witnesses to their trials and triumphs alike. 10 years had not dimmed the fire of that choice she made in the shadowed parlor, turning from cold fortune to the warmth of true partnership. What began as a defiant stand against chains of gold had rippled outward, reshaping not just one family, but the very currents of a society gripped by excess. Olivia's courage, choosing love over the glittering lure of security, taught a lesson etched deep. True wealth lies not in ledgers or lavish estates, but in the unyielding strength of the heart. It reminds us that in eras of gilded illusions, where power preys on vulnerability, one voice raised in truth can topple empires built on deceit. And love, it endures, a compass through storms, rewarding those bold enough to follow its call. Fate, in its mysterious way, honored her gamble. From the ashes of scandal rose a legacy of compassion, a school where daughters of the working class learned to dream beyond factory gates, libraries brimming with stories of resilience, and trade routes fairer than any baron dared imagine. Elias found purpose in reform, Margaret grace in guidance. And the children, they grew in a world softened by their parents' victory, learning early that integrity outshines inheritance, yet the tale whispers a deeper truth for all who navigate life's tempests. Obstacles forge us, but choices define us. Olivia's path shows that rejecting the easy bargain of money for the harder road of authenticity brings not ruin, but revelation. It sparks joy in the quiet moments, the shared glance across a crowded room, the hand extended in solidarity, the future built hand in hand. In this gilded age reborn through their eyes, we see that love's reward is not mere survival, but a life vibrant with meaning. If this journey through passion, peril, and perseverance stirred your soul, pause now and reflect. What would you choose when faced with such a crossroads? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Tell me what moment hit you hardest, or how Olivia's stand inspired your own story. And to prove you sailed all the way to this triumphant shore, write the word horizon in your reply. It lets me know you reached the end and helps spread these tales of heart and heroism to more dreamers like you. For more narratives of romance defying the odds in history's grand sweep, check the cards pinned above. Stories of unbreakable spirits waiting just a click away. Thank you for joining this voyage. Your engagement keeps the flame alive. Until the next adventure, may your choices lead to horizons as bright as theirs.